If you had to name a style of art that anyone and everyone can engage with, it might just be comics and cartoons. And if you wanted to talk to one of its best and busiest practitioners, you'd only need to go down the street from this studio to the OCAD University or right next door at the Art Gallery of Ontario. Her name is Fiona Smyth. Her work is on display all this summer at the AGO, among other places. The most recent book she illustrated for those hitting puberty, called, Sex, got rave reviews in the New York Times. And we're pleased it all brings Fiona Smyth to our studio. Hi.
Hi.
It's so nice to see people in person.
Yeah.
I'm very excited to meet you.
Yeah, I'm so excited to meet you too.
Well, your illustration is featured in the exhibition I Am Here, Home Movies and Everyday Masterpiece, currently on display at the Art Gallery of Ontario. You did the main illustration for the show, a large-scale, detailed collage titled I Am Here. Can you walk us through this piece? It's on the screen right there.
It's supposed to be a celebration of the show and the vibe of the show. So the show's all about self-documentation and kind of the history of self-documentation. So there's a timeline that shows within the show that I created too, that goes back to cave paintings all the way up to TikTok. But for the cover of the catalog and what's used within the show as a mural, is a mix of pieces that are in the show and then things that I picked off the internet and things related to Toronto, and some Easter eggs, like my 102-year-old grandmother is on the back cover and within the mural.
That's lovely.
Yeah.
You mentioned, if you look at that piece, you see some of the events that we've gone through over the past 2 years.
Yeah.
I see a Black Lives Matter part. There's frontline workers, celebrity. During the past 2 years of the pandemic, how did that impact your art and you making art?
Well, I was mostly working on this cover and the work for the kids' book, Sex. And then my personal work, so I mean, those had elements of pandemic in them, maybe more so the I Am Here, less so the Sex book for kids. But my personal work was, I do this weekly drawing for a blog, and it works kind of like a journal. And over the pandemic, starting on the first day of lockdown, I've done this repeated motif of a sleeping woman over kind of a metaphor of a bed of nails. And so, that's very pandemic-y, this very angst-ridden kind of image. Sometimes it's playful, but a lot of the times it's kind of a little downbeat, and
it stops and makes you think, right?
Yeah, and then I guess in the last, less than a year, because it's a weekly piece of art. The sleeping woman has been in a room, you can see defined walls and a window, which feels very much pandemic, she's kind of trapped within this room. And it's morphing as I do them weekly, and eventually I'll probably drop that as a theme.
It's really interesting because at the beginning of the pandemic, we obviously thought it was going to be here for just a few weeks, but it's fascinating to look over the things that we've documented, from the signs on the road, on the train, of that time. I kind of just want to forget about it, but yeah. I guess it's important for us to remember all those things that we went through.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like that we're ready, or media's ready to reflect, because we're not quite out of it yet, right?
And I guess art is one way of doing this. Let's talk about the show. So illustrating for a show like this requires not only your creativity, but also collaboration with other artists. How was your approach? What was your approach?
Well, it was a true collaboration with the curators of the show. So initially when Jim Shedden and his assistant, Robin Liu, reached out to me, they had an idea of how they wanted to approach the cover and what would become a mural within the show. And one of the main inspirations was doodle art from the 70s, something that I grew up with and that Jim for sure had grown up with, and which you can kind of see the evolution of in today's adult coloring books. So So yeah, that was, the visual style of it was going to echo that and kind of the maximalist approach of imagery. And it echoes my earlier work and zines and just, it was supposed to be fun and engaging and also kind of a very today digital Instagrammable moment because you can take pictures in front of it and engage with it. And it's like, there's life-size elements, but then, beyond life-size. Yeah.
When you said zine, the first thing that came in my mind was Sassy. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Sassy magazine. Aside from the main illustration, your piece from cave paintings to TikTok is also featured in the show. It's a comic timeline that documents the key moments throughout history in which new forms of media and technology emerged. What's the inspiration behind this piece?
Well, that had a very concrete outline from the curators of having key moments, and there were a few iterations of it where, because there were so many, I think that even now there's maybe 51 or 52. So they were taking some out that were less important, putting in ones that were more important, and so I had to figure out how to juggle that and make it engaging, visually engaging, but it's still a little bit chaos. And so I brought in my cartooning skills of panel structure to deal with that. So it kind of snakes around and through, and you can see that in the catalog, but also within the larger show.
I wanted to read a passage that's found in the description of the exhibition. It's described this way: homes can be real, concrete places, but they can also be symbolic vessels that evoke childhood memories, fantasies, relationships, and rituals. They can elicit a strange mixture of feelings, comfort, happiness, guilt, and fear. How do you interpret the sense of home in your art?
Well, within the piece for I Am Here, I think the feeling of home was being in Toronto and having that connection to folks in Toronto and just and like favorite art pieces that were in the actual I Am Here show, but that I might have been fond of before the show, and then that home thing connects to the pieces that I've been doing for Cheese, the ones that I was talking about with the sleeping woman, especially the more recent ones that have a definitive room, and how during the pandemic, home has been a comfort, it's safety, sanctuary, but it's also a prison, like that we want to escape at this point, that we want to go out. Well, some of us want to go out and enjoy the world, but and I'm showing those pieces right now at 50 Gladstone Avenue Saloon, and so you can see these ones that I'm talking about with the room.
I think the pandemic really made us think about what home is.
Yeah.
We also saw a lot of people end up losing their homes and create new homes in parks.
Yeah.
And then we had to have this conversation about who public spaces belong to. When you try to convey those messages in art, what is it that you're trying to say?
Well, I think with the mural, I was showing the activism that's happening around these issues, and the question of, where does funding go? Does it go to policing, or does it go to creating resources for folks who need homes? We know how it's skewed, and that's unfortunate, and that, worthy of fighting for more holistic and more, not prioritizing, So within my work, I guess, especially with the kids' book, with Corey Silverberg, the series of kids' books with sex educator Corey Silverberg, social justice is part of the art, part of our mandate of creating the work. So that's, becomes part of my art. And then through my personal work, like more close to the cheese drawings for the blog, it's about feminism. But feminism, which is a tricky word, and I understand why it's difficult for some folks. It's like, There's been a few versions of feminism over the years. And I think a feminist is a true feminist is about fighting for human rights. And
well, it's interesting that you brought up the word feminism, because I think it's become one of those words that can be very politicized.
Yeah.
You identify as a feminist painter, illustrator, and cartoonist. Why is that important?
I think it's important to embrace the word and destigmatize it, and to show what it means through my art, which is about empowering women and women-identified folks.
You occupy a space where there are not very many women, and this the book that you were talking about, Sex, because I think art for a long time has kind of maybe some groups don't belong in the art world, or some people might feel as if I don't belong in that world, or that world's not made for me. And then maybe people in the art world saying that person doesn't belong in the art world.
Yeah.
Have art galleries always been a welcoming space for cartoons and comics?
No, there's been this big divide of highbrow and lowbrow, which has been blurred a lot over more recent years. And I mean, every few months, it feels like there's an article about how comics aren't just for kids anymore. And there's been headway in like crossing that divide of what is art and who are artists, and the same with cartoonists, right? So like going back to the history of cartooning in Toronto, what it looked like when I was an emerging cartoonist / artist to today. Today is completely different.
How has it changed? Because you've been in this industry since the late 1980s.
Yeah.
How has it changed?
It's changed by who's making the comics and whose stories are being told. So back then it was a very white boy kind of scene. There were very few women artists, cartoonists. There were some. And even like Black artists, BIPOC artists, queer artists, there were less. It's not to say that there weren't folks who were making work, but the ones that were being noted and celebrated within the scene or in media might have been more overlooked. And today that's completely changed. And you can see it from going to TCAF, the Toronto Comics Art Festival, and seeing the cartoonists from around the world and publishers from around the world who are celebrated there. And it's exciting times for comics.
It is. It's like you mentioned, because right now with like TikTok, social media, it feels like as if it's kind of democratized the art world. It's kind of challenged it and pushed it, and we're having these conversations about what is art, who gets to decide what is art. When you look back when you were doing this and you were one of very few other bracket, how did you manage to take up space back then?
My work was very, very sexy and very loud, very in your face. I was doing murals. That's what I was recognized for as I left OCAD, or OCA at the time. And so I took up space by being super prolific and getting my work out there and painting in clubs. And you can still see vestiges of that in like the dance cave upstairs in Lee's Palace, and the corner signage of Sneaky D's, which looks terrible now, but it was fluorescent at one point. Yeah, I was making this very sexual work, from the perspective of a young woman artist, and being criticized for being a misogynist. And it's like, what?
How did you receive that?
A few times along the way, because I was doing images of sexualized women, and it didn't stop me. And also I was doing a lot of stuff that critiqued the Catholic Church, or was like a way of exercising it, because I was raised Catholic. So I was doing like these babes on the cross, and just like, controversial kind of imagery. And
imagine if you did that now.
Yeah.
Probably not received the same way, right?
Yeah, but I mean, the church needs to be so criticized, and maybe it would be more timely now.
Well, we see what happened to Sinead O'Connor.
Yeah.
You were inducted into the Doug Wright Awards Giants of the North Canadian Cartoonist Hall of Fame in 2019. What did that recognition mean to you?
Well, I was honored to be inducted alongside the Inuit artist Aluktuk Ipele. And it meant recognition of what I'd done over these many years. Because for a time I felt like maybe I left comics behind and pursued art. I mean, they were happening at the same time, and my personal art is very cartoony and very graphic. But yeah, to be celebrated by my peers, and it was a big moment. For sure.
We talked a little bit at the beginning about cheese. We wanted to show a piece from that collection. It's also, as you mentioned, being exhibited online and in person at 50 Gladstone Avenue Saloon in Toronto. Can you talk us through this piece?
Yeah, so this is that sleeping woman that I refer to, who I call the somnambulist. And yeah, in recent cheeses, she's within this room, and I keep repeating the room, but changing elements within it. So there's this transformed, weird body, and then elements within the room that are anthropomorphized. So this is stuff that I've been doing since I began, in the mid '80s, and continue to do. So.
You mentioned, sex, which I have in my hands right now. This is the third, right?
Yes.
This is speaking, because when I saw this, I got really excited, because it's speaking my son's language, the age group, with the graphic novel. How do you hope kids, by speaking in their language, what do you hope kids get out, not just from the information in it, but the art itself?
I hope that they find themselves. That's something that me and Corey try very hard to make the work engaging and to include everybody. Sometimes we'll make mistakes, and people will tell us, and hopefully we'll improve on the next book. But this book isn't created just by us. It's created by families, kids, doctors, therapists, like an extensive activists, an extensive bunch of people. And so I hope that kids find it empowering, that they find that their thoughts are important, and that they have the answers themselves. That sometimes, like, we're not giving all of the answers in this book. We pose questions for kids to think about their own answers and how they are valued, and that it's fun to read. I mean, there's some more difficult parts in the book, but it opens a conversation, and that's what all three books are about: opening a conversation to what a child's story is, and what their opinions are and their thoughts are.
Really nice to see you, Fiona,
Yes.
and congratulations on all the exhibits, all the work that you're doing. It's really nice to have you here tonight.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate it.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.